Hello and welcome to the Highlands.3 Webinar series, Sustainable Development in Mountain Areas. We are today having our second session, and we are talking today about natural protected areas and environment and governance. I'm happy to see so many people hearing us, and I hope you have a nice protection. As you know, we will have today the program you are seeing now, and after these opening words, we will have 4 presentations, and after that we will have a final discussion with all presenters together. This session, it's the second of 5, and we started in December, and we will move through 4 important topics of the project Highlands.3. We have a very interesting group of panelists and from several countries, different countries and different disciplines, presenting their view and their experience in protected areas and ways of talking about the environment and managing and governing the environment. As you know, this is in part of the project Highlands.3. Highlands.3, it's a big network of 42 partners all over the world, working together, looking for sustainable and inclusive development in mountain areas. And just to give you an impression about the project, I will just show you the homepage of the project, and this is in the opening words of this webinar. If you have been in a webinar before, you know already this part, but I will just repeat. I would like to invite you to visit our webpage under highlands3.eu, and there you will have the most important information about the project and also the activities we are organizing. As you know, we are at the beginning of the project, and still there are not much information, but it's going to grow through the next month and years, and we hope to make this webpage the basis for important information and for a reference for mountain researchers and practitioners all over the world. If you click and read more, you will go to our webpage where you see the description of the project. I think interesting is to see who is participant. Through this menu at the left, you can choose the different part of the webpage. You will see a long list of partners in this project. If you see it as a map, then you can see the distribution all over the world of these projects partners, and clicking in each one, you will see some information and continue to know what are they doing. For instance, in Norway, the topic they are researching on, and some information of each partner. I invite you to go through this homepage and to learn something about Highlands.3. Also, in this page, we put the activities we are having, and at the moment we have this webinar series. That's the most important. You will find here a gallery where to move through the different programs. We are now in the second session, and if you click there, you will see the program, the link to the registration, and you will see after today the recorded webinar. You can see it, you can forward to your colleagues and see it again if you want to, and you will find here all the information you need to see to leave again this webinar. Also, in news of publications, we'll put here the activities we do together and the results of our project. This webpage is going to grow in the next years when we start doing other field research. As you can imagine, the pandemic, it's not helping us to move forward with our research. Before we continue or start with the program, I would like to explain you the main goal of Highlands 3 and why we decide to have these four topics in this webinar series. The main goal is to contribute to inclusive, sustainable development in some mountain areas. And we have for this an interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary approach involving academic institutions such as universities or research institutions, but also practitioners, grassroots initiatives, and also partners from the economic sector, all related to mountain areas. And the initiatives we are going to compare and we want to learn from are related to protected areas or natural protection, tourism, agriculture, and food production. As you can see, these are the three topics of this one and the next two webinars. And then the four webinar will be related to climate change, which is a cross-cutting aspect for every development in mountain areas and actually all over the world. We have other initiatives related to green economy, short value chains initiatives, and other different. We are open for any kind of initiative in mountain areas which we define as or recognize as important for the local development. Before we start with this program, I will just an important technical aspect. You, the audience, are not allowed to speak, but you have the possibility to ask questions, and we want to hear your question. Below, you will have a Q&A function right here on the bottom of your Zoom page. In my case, it's in German, but I think you will have it in your own language. Q&A, question and answers. You will have there the possibility to make questions, and Emmanuel de Castro and Hugo Gomez from Geopark Estrela from Portugal are helping me to collect the questions, and we will collect them and resolve this question immediately after the presentation if they are directly related to the presentation, or we will collect them for the end of the final discussion. Also, please ask questions using this Q&A, not using the chat. The chat is just to communicate between you or all the other people, but if you have concrete questions, please do it using this Q&A function. And it will be easier for us to manage all the questions. Having said that, I would like to start with the program. You already know the program, and I don't have to say much, but we will start with two geographers from the University of Santiago de Compostela in Spain, and they're talking about cross-border natural areas between Galicia and Leon, two biosphere reserve for one range. I am sure we will have very critical aspects in all the presentations, moving us to reflect about what we are doing, what we mean when we talk about protecting areas and environment and governance. And I hope we can take many questions also for the final discussion. I will invite Juan Manuel and Roberto to turn on the microphones and the cameras. And I would like to have to stop my screen. Okay. And now we will see. Also, maybe we can show you.
Here we are.
Roberto and Juan Manuel.
Thank you, Fernando. Hello, my name is Roberto Vila. I'm a geographer and researcher at the University of Santiago de Compostela. Today, Juan Manuel Trillo is going to present part of our most recent research on protected areas and internal borders. I lead you with him. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I've just tried to use my background, but it doesn't work. So this is my home where I usually work these days of pandemia. So good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure for us to be here today with you. We will prefer that to be face-to-face, but it's impossible with the situation. So I hope you are in a pretty well world. You are all fine. We hope so. So maybe in the future we will be able to be together. So I'm going just to share my screen. When I share my screen, I don't see anything because I have both screens in use. But I think I'm going just to do it right now. This is my desktop. You should be watching this. So please, Fernando, tell me that this is fine, that you are just seeing my presentation.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, that is wonderful. Thank you. So, well, this is the title of our presentation, Cross-Border Natural Areas between Galicia and León. So we're dealing with two regions, autonomous communities. I will explain that a little bit in Spain. And the question is that if we do have two biosphere reserves for only one mountain range. So this is the work that is inserted in Roberto's PhD, and one of the supervisors of his work with Dr. Valeria Paul. He's also working with us, of course, in this research, but today it is only Roberto and myself who's going just to make this presentation, which is a team work. So the idea today is just to discuss a little bit the connection between internal borders or boundaries, frontiers, limits, and transboundary protected areas, because mainly when we deal with TBPAs, transboundary protected areas, we're thinking on international boundaries. But we wanted to make all of this literature existing on TBPAs into internal borders, because this is also a line of research we are interested in, and we are working on that in the late years about how to deal with cross-border cooperation, but between regions or provinces or autonomous communities or municipalities into states. So this is the idea of the presentation, to bring these two ideas together with a case study, which are the biosphere reserves of Ankara. So we have two biosphere reserves for only one mountain range. So I will go a little bit with theory, methods, results, and discussion and conclusions. I'm going to try to be quite short and don't use more than 15, 17 minutes. So in terms of theory, we are dealing with TBPA, so transboundary protected areas, and as we all know, they try to achieve protectionist objectives, considering the particularity of our case of this environment, which are divided artificially by political boundaries. We all know that all boundaries are political, so they are all artificial, but in these cases, they usually have strong implications into the management and the governance of these natural areas. TBPA, in theory, should help to manage more efficiently natural resources and the environment, to encourage territorial development, to protect and enhance cultural values, and also to reduce political conflicts. Bear in mind that, for example, in Africa, TBPAs are called parks for peace. So the idea of this is a place where different societies could just gather and cooperate in terms of not only environment protection, but also cultural and political aspects. So if we want to talk about a transboundary, we need to have two contiguous protected areas on both sides of the border, but we need more than that. We need to have cooperation between them. Otherwise, we shouldn't be talking about transboundary protected areas. So in our case study, we have two protected areas. So we have an internal boundary. Then we want to see if we do have cooperation or not. We deal specifically with the transboundary biosphere reserve under the framework of UNESCO. The first one is in 1992. Then we have another document, you know, that have been developing this idea on how to deal with biosphere reserve. And we want just to take a look a little bit to the Seville strategy, because in this document, it is clearly stated that we can try to twin biosphere reserves both at an international level, this is the objective 4.2.6, and at national or internal level, which is the objective 4.2.16 of this Seville strategy. This is interesting. So we have UNESCO saying that we can have a transboundary biosphere reserve internal boundaries on the state. This is important to bear in mind because when we go to literature, there is still a discussion about if we can talk about transboundary protection, transboundary protected areas when we deal with internal boundaries. But still, these and others, they contend that differences in terms of legal frameworks, management procedures, and cultures are really strong only at the international level. So they should focus, or they should talk only about TBPAs in terms of international context, international boundaries. Other authors like Sandwich and others in 2001, they define TBPA precisely with the possibilities of taking into account subnational units such as provinces and regions. So these authors are in line with this Sevilla strategy, and this is what we want just to focus on, what we have done, and with this idea of trying to study these examples that mainly in literature they are not so studied, because when we go to TBPA, so transboundary biosphere reserve, we immediately think about international frontiers. Well, we want just to use all this literature, all of this theoretical and methodological background to into an internal boundary. This is also in line with another line of research that we have been doing lately, which is the discussion or to study the horizontal cooperation between territorial authorities in Spain, which is not really developed. So at the end, we have three entries of study, or three entries at stake in our project, in this research of Ankara that we are presenting today. Transboundary protected areas and biosphere reserve, border studies, which is like the larger, broad area of studies in social sciences that has been really powerful in the last 2 decades, and this idea of the state governance, so how different territorial authorities cooperate or not in a case of Spain, which is a kind of semi-federal state, and we have a lot of studies dealing with external cross-border cooperation, for example, Spain, Portugal, and Spain, France, but we don't have so many studies on internal cross-border cooperation between different regions, or in our case, autonomous communities. So this is a theoretical framework of the presentation we are doing today. So this is a map of the different biosphere reserves in Spain. So this is Spain, one of the countries with most biosphere reserves in the world, but this is the topic of another research that we are doing today. So we hope to talk about that in the near future. But today we are just focusing on these two biosphere reserves here on the map. One on your left, it is the Galician side. On the right, it is the Leon side. So they belong to two different regions, two different autonomous communities in Spain. We are dealing with a mountain range, not very high altitude. This is the highest peak, Pico Cuiña, but it is a mountain range that goes from the northeast to the southwest, and it is not pretty much the political boundary between the two regions, but that should be the idea. Although, for example, this is the division of a watershed. We have the case of Balota with regarding to the rivers of the watershed that should be part of Galicia, but politically it is in the Leon side. Ankara is complicated because this is another picture of natural cultural heritage. The point with Ankara is a toponym that we think started in a valley in the Leon side, but little by little have been spread it. And today, for example, in Galicia, we have a whole county that is called Ancares. And we have a debate today in a little municipality in the Leon side that is trying to change its name for the Ancares. So why? Because Ancares is a well-known, toponym, a well-known name that is related to aspects such as natural, cultural heritage, and importantly, and this is something that is going to show up in this presentation, to tourism. So this is a little bit the information about these two biosphere reserves. Both of them have the same year of designation, 2006, but their origin is completely separated. Surface is pretty much the same, As for inhabitants, there are more people living in the Leon side on the Galician side. Sorry, the other way around. Lugo, Lucenses is Galicia, Leon is the Galician side, but there are not a lot of people living there. An interesting difference that is going to show up in the results is that the biosphere reserve in Lugo, in Galicia, it is managed by the provincial council, and on the other side, the Leon Biosphere Reserve, it is managed by a consortium of municipalities. That makes a difference in terms of territorial scale. I'm going to explain that later on. And also, it is important to bear in mind that in this context, we have another legal devices for protection at the European level and also at the national level. So we don't have only these two biosphere reserves. We have an overlapping list of devices, and also this is something that is going to show up in the results because it has implications. So our methods are very schematic. It is a qualitative methodology. We have tried to give voice to a lot of people and stakeholders. So we went to the field and where we did different semi-structured interviews. So the results that we're going to present right now, they are the different codes that we have extracted from the results, and that is what people think about the management of the two biosphere reserves. So at the very beginning, it is clear that for some people, we are in front of an artificial border because we are in a mountain range that is divided in two different regions. So yeah, this is an artificial border. The second aspect that can be shown here is that there is also a debate about what the Ancares are. So what does it mean? What is Ancares? And here, there are people saying that the limits of Ancares are growing every year because it's little by little more people or more municipalities or more regions or territories would claim that they are the Ancares. And this is related to this other quote that said that Ancares exist for as long as mountaineers and tourists have started to come here. That means that the little Ancares is a name that is related to the mountain, to some activities, and to tourism. And this connection between tourism and devices for natural protection, I think this is, or we think this is important to bear in mind because this is something we should reflect on, and it's going to show up later on. We have detected that there were an initial rejection of the local population, but this is connected with this idea of there are so many devices that people started to be kind of bored of having so many devices with the idea of what is a biosphere reserve? Just another thing that is going to complicate my life because some activities are going to be forbidden because I live in a biosphere reserve. And also we have detected that this idea of reserve is connected like, oh yeah, that means that I cannot do anything. This is a reserve for anything. So I can't just make up my living. I can't continue with my normal life. This other idea of the top down, this is important in terms of governance and in terms of management of the biosphere reserve. And this is pretty much connected to one of them, which is the Galician side. Because in theory, all of the literature and if we read all of the documents related to biosphere reserve, they should start from the very territory. But at the end, for example, this is the case of the Galician Biosphere Reserve, that was not the case. This is something that was set by the person working nowadays in this biosphere reserve. So that comes to two different models. So we have two biosphere reserves with two different models, and that has started just at the very beginning. And I told you something related to that when I presented the biosphere reserves, because in the case of Leon, just at the very beginning, that was the local council, so the municipalities, the local stakeholders that were there to ask for this device. They wanted just to have a biosphere reserve in the territory. But on the other side, on the Galician side, the Lugo side, it was like the provincial council who did it. So in the case of Lugo, that was our respondent said it was much more a top-down procedure, and in the Leon side was a bottom-up procedure, and that has implications in a day-to-day management of this biosphere reserve, because one is born from within, that would be the Leon and the Leon side, and another one is born from outside because people think about Lugo or Santiago de Compostela, I mean the provincial capital, the regional capital, as far away, so people in their offices taking decisions about this mountain range without being there. So this is the reason why we have two different models. So we have here two ideas related to the Galician side. It is very complicated, its management, because people say there are some technicians, but they don't really live in the territory, and at the same time they also have to manage another biosphere reserve, in this case Terra Dominio. And also this is another opinion, when the biosphere reserve organize some activities, they are not really addressed to the people that are living there. They are addressed to an active population. When people live in this biosphere reserve, it is an aging population that are not working anymore. But on the other side, if you go to the Leon Biosphere Reserve, as people there said to us, they consider that having a manager only for the Biosphere Reserve living in territory, that makes easier to manage, because it is a model closer to the territory, which is not the case in the Galician side. And also, even though they could have less money, less funds in order to organize activities, the impact is higher, because people working there, they know the territory and they know the needs of the population living there. So we have two biosphere reserves, different management, different activities. So at the end, this is the last slide of the results. Is there any kind of cooperation between both of them? We have detected some scarce activities between both biosphere reserves, but really, when they were considered to implement measures related to extensive farming, signaling, they didn't work out finally. Why? Because there were a lot of administrative problems, a lot of obstacles, because they were dealing with two regional administrations. And also, if you ask them directly if it could be a good idea to have a transboundary reserve, because again, we have two reserves, but we want to know if they were cooperating, they say, no, we think this is not a good idea. Mainly, and this is important to say, because they compare the situation with another cases in Spain, when we do really have an interregional biosphere reserve, and it doesn't work really well. So they think, we have more cases in Spain, they have an interregional biosphere reserve, it doesn't work. So we think this is not a device that could help us to improve our cooperation. So, end the slides with discussion and conclusions. Internal borders of boundaries, of course, are perceived as fiction. This is the case of Ancares, but they do have strong implications in terms of management and governance of these TDPAs. We do have an overlap devices for natural protection that happens all over the world, and sometimes that makes complicated not only the management of these natural areas, but also the engagement of local population there, because they don't really understand what is going on, and sometimes because we leave top-down processes. Then there is this question that we think it is a key aspect in order to think about how to manage and how is the governance of these natural areas. I would really want it to have a better protection, while we're seeking to develop a tourist hotspot with the idea of we are in a biosphere reserve. Come here, we have a lot of tourism. Are we thinking about tourism, or are we thinking about protection? If we focus to this map, so this is the biosphere reserve of Ancares zoning. We do have two different zonings of the two biosphere reserves that are not coordinated. It is true that the core area, it is pretty much connected to the highest peak of the mountain range, but then the rest is very different, the Leon side and the Galician side. And at the same time, it doesn't really follow the model of the UNESCO saying that you have to have a very clear core area, then the buffer zone, and then the transition area. So this is an example of having two buffer reserves without any kind of connection, because we don't have a legal or formal agreement. We don't have a common management document. And even though we don't have a shared informative material, so if you visit one side of the mountain range, you are not going to have information regarding the other side. So it is true that we have detected some informal cooperation in some particular issues, so that is the reason why we have we see in the Sandwich and other scale from 1 to 5 in order to see if we have cooperation in natural areas. We think we can just say this is a 2 because there is a kind of a communication, but it is impossible to go further because there are a lot of obstacles due to the belonging of the biosphere reserve to different regions. And again, the idea of the possibility of having an interregional biosphere reserve is openly rejected because it is conceived as an instrument that wouldn't help to improve cooperation. So this is the last slide. All of this research is in connection, or this is a case in point about the absence of interregional cooperation between regional authorities in Spain. So we have 2 biosphere reserves belonging to 2 autonomous communities, and the cooperation, the communication is really complicated. Sometimes it is easier to cooperate through the Jerez, Galicia, and north of Portugal than 2 biosphere reserves separated by an internal limit in Spain. We are in front of a case that should be this impossibility of dividing a same natural region, which is a mountain range, but it has been done, and it has, of course, a lot of implications. And finally, and this is still an open question, and we do have another research that are working on this aspect. It's appropriate to keep on referring to los encargos leoneses, encargos lucenses. I mean, why do we talk about 2 different encargos? Well, we have to think about the implications of regional boundaries, the rejection or not of local population regarding these conservation measures, and finally, and this is important, we don't really have a clear definition of what encargos is, and this is an open discussion. So these are some of the references that have been used during this presentation. And if you want to know more, this research is a part of a broader research that has been recently published in a paper. It's in Spanish, but I'm sure that some of you could read and understand Spanish. So here you have the information co-authored by Roberto, Valeria, Paolo, and myself. So sorry if I have talked more than 15 minutes. I think it's been 20. Sorry for that, Fernando. This is all. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Juan Manuel. It was really very interesting speech, and you presented a very interesting case study. I think it's also relevant for many other regions in the world. And we have 2 questions really directly connected to your presentation. I don't think maybe we can take some part of this answer to the final discussion, but I will go to the first one. It's related to conflicts in such a transboundary protected area. Well, in this case, I think maybe this is the question not really right, because it's not transboundary area, 2 different protected areas. But if you have conflict in the international level, we have several cases of international transboundary protected areas, not intranational but transnational. Who resolve these conflicts? And if there are a way to resolve such a conflict, do you have any experience or example to talk about or to know to mention? If it's possible to extend or transfer this way of resolving conflicts in transnational level to this intranational transboundary region?
Wow, Yeah, well, of course, we don't have the same kind of tensions that we do have in international boundaries. And also we have to think that it is not the same an EU boundary than a boundary in Africa and Asia or in another context. If we did, for example, with Portugal and Spain, we don't have any kind of conflict. So when I mentioned the Park of Peace, this is something mainly focused on Africa, when you still have problems of the limitation and demarcation of the boundary. Yeah, remember that there are a lot of boundaries in Africa that haven't been demarcated, so you don't really have the marks of the limit. So these Parks for Peace have tried to be a ground for communication on cooperation. So I would say that we cannot really try to implement the measure that we have in other more conflictual context in order to apply into an internal, but I would say it depends on the general framework, because this is an internal boundary in Europe, and I wouldn't say that an external boundary in Europe is have a conflict. But yes, in Africa or in other countries in Asia. So I would, as a geographer, I would work in larger regions, so the European Union in this case, Africa, Asia, and then just try to apply our knowledge to the different, more local contexts. In the European Union, of course, it is not the same an external boundary with the east or with the south, with Morocco, the Mediterranean, than a border between Germany or the Netherlands and France and Spain. But the idea of this kind of research is just to be reminded that we have borders all around, and the limits exist all around. They are all artificial, and sometimes, because I mainly work in cross-border cooperation, we focus too much on international cooperation, and sometimes we forget that we can have the same problems at an internal level. In the case of the European Union, we do have a big program like Interreg to help cooperation at the external level. We do have money, funds to implement projects, but we don't have the same thing in the case of, for example, in Spain, between autonomous communities. That means that sometimes it's easier to cooperate with the other side in terms of Portugal or France, because you have money, and also you have an international legal framework in Europe, like the European Group of Territorial Cooperation, can do it internally. Because in Spain, there is I would say a vertical cooperation between the central states and the regions, but when it comes to an horizontal cooperation between autonomous communities, it doesn't work out. Why? Mainly because we don't have funding, for example, and this is a very good idea. We don't have funds for that.
Very interesting. Yes, I think we can take some of these ideas to the final discussion, also about the possibility to transfer solutions or ways of managing such a conflict or whatever to other, not only to different levels, but also to other regions. The second question, please maybe a shorter answer, is about more the practice of the people. Is there any cañada real or other transhumance crossing one of both areas? This means people and animals crossing the area only in some periods, of course with the special requirements and advantages for the biodiversity conservation. That's the question about the human practices. And
yeah, well, there used to be, but it doesn't exist anymore. So that was in the past. Yeah, we do have this kind of connection, but not anymore. Imagine that I gave you some data. It is a very depopulated area, and this is connected with the inland areas in Spain, rural depopulated areas. So yes, in the past, but not at the moment. So transhuman practices have disappeared. Yep.
Okay, well, thank you. And I will move forward to the next presentation.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much, Juan Manuel, for the presentation. Also, Roberto, for your work behind. I guess that you make most of the interviews and such things. And we will move forward to the next presentation. I would like to invite Branko Lukacs to join us with his camera and microphone. in order to talk and present his studies about restoration of biodiversity on degraded cross-country skiing tracks in Pokljuka in Slovenia. We are moving to another region, mountain region in Europe, and I'm happy to have you here. Branko is agronomist from the study and it's working in this aspect since several years. I'm happy to having you here, Branko. Please go on.
Okay, just I will try to.
Yes, you have to share your screen first.
Yes, I'm.
And we will do the same. The direct questions to your speech we will ask at the end. And if you have something we can take for the final discussion, it's also very interesting for all of us.
Can you see my presentation now?
We can see your presentation. Please go on.
Okay. Thank you for kind introduction from you, Fernando. Dear audience, good afternoon also, or good morning also in my behalf. As Fernando said, I'm a researcher and agronomist in Crop Science Department of Agriculture Institute of Slovenia. My research priorities are management of permanent grassland, especially in connection to its nutritive value. In last years, I started to work also on ecological restoration of meadows and pastures with native seeds. Of course, ecological restoration projects with the objective of creating site-specific vegetation cover have obtained increasing importance throughout Europe in recent years. In some alpine countries like Austria and Swiss, the methods of restoration of degraded areas have been developed systematically in last decade, whereas in Slovenia we are gaining first experiences. However, it's a great honor for us to present our first findings and work. Because we have such a broad audience, I will spend a few minutes to present Slovenia. My country is one of the smallest European countries in terms of land area and population in Central Europe. Thanks to unique position, and it is one of the hotspots of biodiversity. Our fauna comprises more than 21,500 continental taxa and at least 1,600 marine taxa. Slovenia is known for its karst region with a rich subterranean fauna, of which many species were first discovered and described in Slovenia. 3 out of 5 species of large carnivores found in Europe are present in Slovenia: the brown bear, grey wolf, and Eurasian lynx. Despite the fact that the state of biodiversity is good, we face similar problems as elsewhere in the world. We are losing the most important species, rich grassland types in lowlands due to intensification of agriculture, in highlands due to abandonment of agriculture. As it was already mentioned in the title, today we will focus on Pokljuka. We will look at how we are trying to solve problems in this area, providing benefits for nature and the people who farm on this area. Experimental area of the project is located in northwestern Slovenia, in Julian Alps, near Italian and Austrian border. Pokljuka is forested high karst plateau in Julian Alps with a few mountain pasture and meadows on its border. It is 20 kilometers long and almost as wide. Due to its altitude and fresh air, it is very popular touristic destination in all seasons. Tourists can enjoy in cycling, hiking, northern walking, skiing, or cross-country skiing. Every year, Pokljuka hosts the World Biathlon Cup. Therefore, it is one of the most famous Slovenian plateaus. Pictures on the right side present mountain pasture Zajamniki with wooden sheets on plateau, Pokljuka, and mountain pasture Konjica with grazing cattle. Of course, there are other pastures. During last decade, some problems occurred on Pokljuka that needs to be urgently addressed. First of them are cross-country skiing tracks, which are disturbing during the time when they are not covered in snow for local community and tourists. In the past years, available conventional seed mixtures, which are not adapted to the climate and site conditions of ski runs at high elevations, were unsuccessfully used on Pukluka Sports Center. The second problem identified in this area is the fact that tourism is more profitable than agriculture, which will gradually lead to the abandonment of agriculture use. However, if mountain pastures are abandoned, this means spontaneous reforestation, overgrowth, and the landscape will become less attractive for tourists during summer season. On pictures, you can see an example of overgrowth of mountain pastures within 38 years in other parts of our national park. Thus, we came to conclusion that the restoration of degraded cross-country skiing track is necessary, but also encouraging agriculture use to preserve the cultural landscape is essential in Pukluka. So a project was conceptualized with the aim of restoration biodiversity using native seeds on degraded cross-country skiing tracks on Pukluka, and introduction of local farmers in production of seed preservation mixtures for use on local mountain meadows, abandoned areas, or local degraded areas after earthworks. The project is run by us in collaboration with 4 local farmers, Sports Center Pukluka and Triglav National Park. The project started in 2020 and it will last 2 years. We know that this is too short period for restoration project. Therefore, we are already looking for opportunities on national level for further cooperation with farmers, Triglav National Park and Sports Center Pukluka. In order to achieve 2 aims of the project, following steps of the project have been predicted. At the beginning of the experiment, donor meadows on 4 farms have been selected and botanical composition have been recorded. We have detected from 55 to more than 80 species on donor meadows. In next step, the seed collection methods and method for seeding have been selected, and at optimal time, this method have been used. The results are expected in next season when they will be evaluated and a recommendation for long-term use will be prepared. The best method will be reused to reproduce results and hopefully long-term restoration will be achieved. As I already mentioned at the beginning, in recent years, a large number of different harvesting methods and application techniques have been developed in Europe and worldwide for exploitation and application of site-specific seeds or plant material. We are testing the most appropriate methods for our environmental and economic conditions of farm. In this project, we are testing combined harvesting and hand collection for direct use or propagation of individual species on small nursery fields. We have also planned to test brush harvesting in following vegetation season. On pictures on the right side, you can see that by hand collection, summer workers are appreciated. So if anyone wants to enjoy, you are kindly invited to visit us this year. I guess the circumstances will allow us to travel worldwide. On the bottom of the slide, you can see combined harvesting and me with farmers at the harvest on one of the included farms. On cross-skiing tracks of the project partner, we are testing following restoration methods or their combination: manual sowing of directly harvested seeds with combine, spreading green material, spreading hay, spreading racket material, combination of wooden clippings and manual sowing of harvested seeds with combine, combination of spreading hay and harvested seeds. We have also natural succession as a control. Restoration is not only the initial set of intervention on surface to be restored, but more or less lasting active process. To keep grassland free of scrubs and trees and to maintain biodiversity, restored surfaces will be in future extensively grazed. All plots were sown in first half of July. First visible results were seen 4 weeks later in August. We can see that emergence of plant has been successfully by 3 methods: spreaded green material, manual sowing of harvested seed with combine on wooden clippings, and on bare soil without soil protection against erosion. Afterwards, late in summer and autumn, development of plants was very slow. Based on presented pictures, we can conclude that one of the most important factors is sufficient soil content. However, we are expecting sufficient vegetation cover above 70% in second growing season. However, as always, problems occur during the project. As you can see on this picture, spread-rich seed material cannot always prevent soil erosion after extremely high precipitation, or let's say heavy rain, as occurred in August and September of 2020, when more than 100 liters per square meter in less than 24 hours fell twice in a row. Due to the damage made by wind, additional forest works were necessary in summer, and tracks under the experiment were used for wood removal and were therefore damaged. Those tracks on left picture were made by heavy forwarder. This winter, Pukljuka is covered in snow. There is already more than 2 meters of snow, and more is expected in coming days. This is one of the strongest winter in last 20 years, even on that altitude. The problem is that the dense snow cover hinders exchange of oxygen between plant cover and atmosphere for several months. Probably snow cover will last at least 5 months. So it is possible that we will have to repeat some of renaturation activities. During the first year of the project, we have identified some weaknesses in regard to local seed production, which will have to be addressed in future. These are fragmentation of the ownership of the land, lack or limited knowledge about seed production. For example, farmers know typical plants or a few medicinal plants, but they don't know much about plant biology, when are seeds ripen, how to harvest, how is with seed propagation, etc. Important obstacle is also inaccessibility of meadows in this area for large combines due to narrow roads, rockiness, or too steep meadows. Infrastructure on farm is also very limited, especially for work with seed material. Farm owners are relatively old. They also have limited financial resources for investing in harvesting, processing with seeds, and storage capacity for seed material. And probably the most important factor is small demand, or let's say limited market for native seeds in Slovenia. However, we are optimistic, and if I conclude, we are expecting the following long-term results. First is to obtain a sufficient vegetation cover, more than 70% in 2 or 3 years, which will guarantee a long-term stabilization of the soil and reduce erosion and surface runoff to an acceptable degree on tracks under experiment. We hope that we will establish first local network of native seed producers, which will provide seeds for rehabilitation of degraded areas on Pukljuka and our national park. Of course, dissemination of obtained knowledge and increase social awareness on restoration actions in scientific, professional, and local communities is crucial for future renaturation of degraded areas in Slovenia. We also hope that this project will encourage restoration in other similar areas in Slovenia through uptake of public-private partnership and market-based initiatives. This would be also all from my side. Thank you for your attention. Here are some contacts for potential collaboration or additional questions.
Thank you, Branko, for this very interesting speech and example of hard work in restoration. And at the moment, we don't have any question, but there are a lot of topics we can take from your input to the final discussion. But we are a little late on time. And it's coming one short question. Maybe you can answer very, very shortly or move to the final discussion. Who exactly is responsible to improve the tracks? The farmers, the tourism actors, who is doing it? Maybe you can say just a short answer then.
Yes, I can answer that. The responsible is Sports Center, Pukljuka.
Okay, thank you. And we can put it to the end. About the actors, I think it's a very important question. Who is doing what in any of our projects? Well, I will like to move forward the next presentation. As you know, the next one will be Antonio Abreu, and he is representing the Asociación Geoparque Estrela from Portugal. And he is going to share with us his reflection about why the best governance is not enough in protected areas. I think he's going to bring us all his experience as a biologist in several levels and different areas in Portugal and in different environments also. And I think we want to bring us to reflect and to rethink the ways we go to this topic. Antonio, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Fernando.
I stop my presentation, then you can share your own now.
Thank you, Fernando. Thank you for the invitation for being here. Well, I just noticed that my background is not appropriate, so.
Yes, it looks really well. It's perfect.
Yeah.
You see maybe there's a mirror, but we see it perfect.
Okay,
don't worry.
Perfect. Thank you especially to Emmanuel Castro and his team from Estrela for inviting me to take part and to be aware of your project, which I found very interesting. And in fact, as you said, I will simply share a little bit of my experience or the result of my experience as a biologist. I am currently linked with a UNESCO chair at the University of Coimbra, where I do some research. After quitting UNESCO, where I was helping to manage UNESCO Biosphere Reserves and UNESCO Global Geoparks, and all my life was related with biodiversity and protected areas, and also the issues of governance and management was always present. So I will share some thinking about that, and I will start sharing my screen just to try to get on track and follow the time. Can you confirm if you see the screen?
Now we can see your screen and your presentation.
Okay,
yes.
Perfect. The title that I just invented is "Why the Best Governance is Not Enough in Protected Areas." And I put best in practice in brackets, because as we will see later, sometimes we mixed concepts, and it brings very difficult to understand if we are really talking about governance when we address this issue. So basically, it is important to be clear and to know that we are talking about the same thing when we address any subject, and in particular a protected area. Currently, we all agree that a protected area, it is related with conservation, sustainable use, and equitable access to and benefit sharing from genetic resources, especially if we consider the biodiversity and ecosystems. It is then something that works with natural and social systems. So also identity, cultural heritage issues and topics are relevant for any protected area, meaning that socioeconomy and sustainable development, which is a quite recent concept, is always present in any protected area. This is 21st century. And when we address a protected area, we tend to consider and to have this inclusive and global approach. But in fact, the majority or many protected areas around the world, when they were created, and all the legal framework and legislation specific or less specific, and all the existing framework, doesn't cover this. So this is very important to have it very clear. that many and the majority of protected areas may need revisitation on the conceptual and framework approach, because although they are working and linked with these aspects and they are incorporating these on their daily life, most of the times they don't have a real framework that allows the consideration of all these aspects as it should, and these can be reflected in conflicts and other limitations. So there are many reasons for establishing a protected area now and in the past, but especially now. It can be a strict interest in conservation of biodiversity, while it can be more functional, so trying to ensure that the main or the most important ecosystem services, which is also a recent concept, are available. So through our activity and the protection level that we want to provide, we are also ensuring that the natural systems and the ecosystem services are, goods and services are provided. We can create a protected area for a specific element. It can be a species, an habitat, or whatever, natural monument. It can also incorporate the interest or the purpose of increasing or enhancing resilience to the effects of climate change, to preserve strict preservation of natural resources, to prevent diseases and pests. And this is something that will be quite frequent in the future, considering the days that we are all living at global level. So in fact, a protected area can provide many other benefits to nature and to humanity. But these are reasons. So why should we establish a protected area? And again, when we check each protected area, maybe we need to be clear on why did we create, what is the purpose, what is, it can be all of them or just one or two, but it must be clear. And in many cases, it's not really clear. There was a momentum, there was a purpose, there is a consideration, but it's not always clear why do we have. And then later we will see that there is another dimension of that, that is for what, which is very important. So then it is important also to consider governance and management, which are distinct aspects of a protected area. Many times they are mixed, they are confused, although they are strictly, explicitly linked. Management, it's about who does what, or who has the responsibility to take action, to administrate, and to implement so a more practical activity or responsibility in the fields. While governance is about who decides. Of course, a manager also decides, but governance, when I speak about governance, and most of the literature also reflects this, it's about who decides, and who decides, it's not necessarily someone that is in the field that has the hands in conservation or whatever. It can be a collective, it can be a group, it can be a citizen, it can be a representation of the socioeconomic activities, science, whatever, policy, whatever. And we must consider this both during the creation, so during the process of establishing a protected area, and the previous speaker on the first presentation, we saw that there are different models. We can decide, we can motivate, so the decision to start a process can be from a single person or from an institution, but also during the development. So after the establishment, during the development and the work that a protected area is responsible to do, it is important to have clear who does what, who has responsibility, and who decides. Although it can be exactly the same actor to do, or the same actors to do both things. But it is important to distinguish what is management and what is governance. There are many governance models. So these are the classics that you can find in literature. It can be governmental, which means that protected area is managed strictly by a department or any governmental agency. It can be, we can have a governance model about co-management, so which means that more than one entity has a capacity for deciding and approving or whatever. It can be a private, not public. It can be just a private area, and with a management exclusively private, or it can be without any papers or without any legal framework, or with a legal framework, but managed by local actors, so communities. And there are many examples in the world about this. Of course, in between any of these models, you can find or incorporate transition between one and another. None of these governance models is better than the other. It will depend on the purpose, on the capacities, because in my experience, I traveled and I worked in many, many countries all over the world. And I saw amazing protected areas strictly managed by governmental departments and even by the army, like in Sudan, for instance. I saw maybe the best marine protected area that I saw in my life. It's managed by the military department. So, and it works. And there is a good cooperation with fishermen, so no problem. Although from the management and the governance models, the decision is centralized and exclusive. And it works considering the purpose, and the results are really visible. There is a lot of research, a lot of participation, but who decides and who does the work, who manages, who pays, it's clearly let's say democratic or non-participatory, but it works. And the reverse, it's also true. I saw many community managed protected areas or areas with some kind of protection that works perfectly. As I saw many others in any kind of governance models that doesn't work at all. So this is also something that is really important to understand. And this part of the problems that we may have, it's about or solution, it's about conflict and cooperation. And we can have conflict. I saw in the first presentation that the presenter was considering conflict as more or less about peace and war, but we can have conflict inside the same. We can have institutional conflicts. We can have conflicts about different perspectives on the values or the utility of ecological aspects. We can have conflicts and cooperation or cooperation on socioeconomic aspects, whether it doesn't matter if it is between countries or administrative different areas. So it can be within a community. We can have all these kinds of conflicts or cooperation opportunities in protected areas. So it is important to consider that conflict and cooperation, it does respect with all of these dimensions. So the success of a protected area, it's about, and I said this previously, it's about engagement and participation. And engagement, even from the managers, because many times the managers are simply doing their work by the book and not really proactive and trying to change. Because one thing that I found in my life and my experience is that protected areas are not able and open to change. Once they are created forever. And this is a paradox, because in my point of view, the success of a protected area is when it doesn't need any more protection. Because the success, we live in the 21st century, is that when an habitat is restored and understood by the users and the stakeholders, that the pressure and the stress that existed before that led to the reason for establishing the protection and the investment, because protecting an area, it's an act of investment. We need resources, financial, human, knowledge. So there is a lot of work and investment. But in the end, when do we have the success of that investment? Because any other project, in any other sector of human life, there is an end. We must have an end. So this is not intrinsic, this is practical. So if I, as a government or a community, established a protected area to restore an habitat, we need to know, even if it is 1 million years, when it will be, or what is the trend. Are we better? Are we improving? Are we still under the same pressure or the same threats? And we don't know. There is a problem of communication from protected areas that reduces the capacity of motivating engagement and participation. And participation, it's not just a folkloric thing. So it's not just about number of people participating or volunteers. So that, let's say, more folkloric and symbolic attitude, but really engagement by compromising people and actors. So the moment of creating a protected area is more about why. So there is a driver that is understood. Even if I don't agree, I can understand why a protected area is created. But more important is for what. So what is the purpose? From why to what, this can make the difference. And governance should address this. So to ensure that participation, information, and motivation is based on the purpose and for what. And this for what must have a meaning for any actor. If they understand, if they know, if they have space to participate, to understand, and even to change the reason of existence or the purpose or the priorities of our protected areas, this can make a difference. Of course, this is not the traditional vision, and it calls for what I designate as functional governance. We need effective participation at all stages, so not only after, but during the conception, the development, implementation, evaluation, whatever. We need to ensure that there is an understanding and adaptation to complexity and change, because it's not linear, although many times a protected area is presented as a linear thing. So there is a species to be protected, let's protect it, and the world must stop everything, because we divide the world into sides, one in favor and the other against, and we are not able to explain that to protect a species or a singular element, we need to understand that there is a complexity, a complex system that requires a change. Transparency and independent evaluation. I don't know many cases of evaluation of protected areas that are made from outside. So it's not clear. We don't have, although we have report of activities, but evaluation of efficiency and adequacy of the activities or the priorities, we don't have. So maybe we need to introduce this on a more functional governance, and especially availability for change. We should revisit the purpose and even the areas of a protected area, whatever it is, and test it like a resistance test against the criteria and the principles and the needs and the understanding and the knowledge that we all today agree. So that sustainable development is an integrated concept, that isolating a subject, it's not the best way. So these are some of the issues that I would like to put in the table for discussing, although I don't see Clearly, how can we incorporate these in the dialogue when we have so many things to do and basic needs that are still to fulfill, but in particular, an immense diversity of situations for protected areas in different contexts. Thank you, and I remain available for any question and discussion.
Thank you, Antonio. Thank you very much. Again, also another very, very interesting presentation. We have two questions, but I would like to move these questions to the final discussion. Antonio, you can read the questions and try to define the idea and bring in the next reflections and the final discussion if you want. Huh? There are two questions now. You can see down there.
Okay, I see there is one. There is one question.
But we will leave it for the final discussion. You can bring in these ideas and answer to these questions in the final discussion. I think we will have more time if we do it like this. And I would like to invite you to go with me to the next presentation. And now we will move to France, where we have Olivier Barrière and Noémie Cavanis from the Institute of Research pour le Développement and the Pact Pastoral. My French, it's not good enough to spell this institution, but I'm really happy to have you here, Olivier, with your scientific reputation, and Noémie with his experiences also from the practice and from the practical way, and they want to introduce us this Pact for Social Ecological Co-viability, with I think it's really interesting, maybe new way of thinking and working about our relation to nature. Because we are running out of time, I will just leave it like this and ask you, Oliver, to start with your presentation. And then after Oliver, I had to stop mine. After Oliver, Olivier, Noémie will continue with the presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Fernando. So we have not very much time, so I'm going to share my my screen.
You can use, of course, 15 minutes. It's not a problem, and please go on. And we will have less time for the final discussion. But it's like it is. It's always the same problem with time.
Okay, is it okay for you? You can see it.
We can see it. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we are both to present that that topics. Noémie Cabane, she's not in research area, but she is in really in she's active on the earth. I mean, she's not at the university or institutional research, but she's on very acting on the territory. So I'm going to start, and after I will give her the speak. Territorial Pact for Socio-Ecological Co-viability. In first, we are going to. I'm going to present you socio-ecological co-viability. What is it? It's a new path, and in second way, Noémie will present you the Pastoral Pact. The idea of socio-ecological co-viability is coming from several years with a team, a big team, and we could write a book on that subject, as we say in spring edition. First, thinking a sustainability trajectory requires reinventing ways of existing. This reinvention is defined by getting out of the partition that is made between human society and non-human. I will come back later on that. The reasoning starts from the challenge of metamorphosing the relationship between humans and the living by leaving the question of an environment or nature to adopt the idea of continuity between humans and other living entities. A new trajectory is proposed: socio-ecological co-viability for a sustainable development that reintegrates humans into the living around a common earth. The objective here is to develop a new trajectory of sustainability translated by a way of life, uniting the living by a model of viability of social groups to the environment, which is social ecological co-viability. Viability is defined here as capacity to exist sustainably, to flourish, to feel good, and to be happy. It's more than to be only safe. Socio-ecological co-viability is therefore defined as a property of interdependence that depends on the interactions between human and non-human systems and is based on viability links. Within living organisms, the networks of interaction form are interweaving, expressing interconnections that define a collective based on common health. Collective or community, as you want. The capacity of species to manage the components of their environment and the resulting biological balances are the result of different evolutionary histories that lead to the emergence of new characters. Thus, the interspecific associations existing in the living world are particularly conditioned by the evolution of each partner species. Reconnecting man to nature therefore means placing man in a network of interactions between the species in his environment and is essential to maintain his adaptability to the changing world and the dynamics of his evolutionary history. The co-viability concept paradigm sets out the prospects for a world where all the components interact and evolve in a sustainable manner. And I'm coming to a figure on interdependence between humans and the living, the collective or community, defining the different mode of relationship between humans and non-humans. Very important, the way to have a relationship. This figure shows the way of existing within a framework of socio-ecological co-viability. Ways of thinking and being define relation ontology. We can see spiritual, assimilation, analogy, and viability. That's in red. Western or westernized societies do not appear in this figure because they are in a separation with the living. They define a so-called naturalist ontology which places the human in a relationship of predation toward nature. The recent excuse me. The recent COP, the COP15 draft of the Convention on Biological Diversity is based on a theory of change, and on the objective of living in harmony with nature through global biodiversity framework. This theory of change provides a plan to, I cite, bring about a transformative change in the relationship between society and biodiversity, and to ensure by 2050 the realization of the shared vision of living in harmony with nature. However, we can fear not going far enough and always remaining in the separation of human and the living. That's why we said here in Occident, we talk about the relationship between man and nature. And the aim is to go far away and to not to separate. Cohabitability brings a real paradigm shift that is envisaged, moving from an opposition of man to nature to an alliance, a shared existence, a living together. At least there are 8 challenges for transdisciplinarity research that we can set for ourselves in the Highlands project. Rapidly, the ecological consequences of the decisions, the relationship between human health and human and environmental health, mode of existence, that means a way of being alive, way of living in the area, legal regulation, what place do rights have in relation to living beings, the socio-cognitive representation of the human-nature relationship, ecological solidarity, adaptation and resilience capacity, and reconstructing a common house by reconnecting humans to the biosphere. That's to conclude this this part. On this, it's too quick presentation of cohabitability. Of course, this figure presents the passage to be made between the old world of separation and to new world of relations, of links between humans and non-humans. That's what you say in the three part and with color green, blue, and another. That's so the aim is not to stay with the idea that we have to continue in the development, even if it is a sustainable development. But now we have to think about our viability. And so we'll try to answer to your question. And I leave my place to Noémie. And for that, I have to give to her.
You have to stop your sharing your screen. You will see a stop button if you move your mouse.
I don't know.
It's a small one. Or maybe I can stop for you. I can try to.
Arrêtez. Ah, coupez mon vidéo. Les vidéos, coupez mon vidéo. I can't see. Sorry.
I will.
Okay.
Oh, you did it. You did it. Great.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay. So before I start, I apologize for my accent and my English. I'm going to try to present you a project resulting from the work of Oliver and a group of breeders on a territory in the south of the France. It's a group of 15 municipalities called the Cos-Égual-Cévennes Terre Solidaire. It's a rural territory with few people, but many herds. And it's in the area of a national park and UNESCO territory. In this territory, pastoralism is a historical practice which is part of its cultural and landscape identity. So in order to maintain this practice, which faces many constraints such as access to land, the actors of the territory, with the help of Oliver and research, have created a Pastoral Pact. It's a form of charter adopted by elected representative who govern the territory. The pact sets out new local regulations. So first of all, a preamble recalls the multifunctionality of the space, which includes various actors, breeders, hunters, inhabitants, tourists in the same space. So the pact recognizes that pastoralism is of general interest for the territory. The pact then lays down principles such as pastoral servitude to facilitate the movement of herds, a priority to be given to livestock farmers in the transfer of properties, recognition of pastoralism in urban planning regulations, the search for abundant land and the mobilization of this abundant land, and the maintenance of the routes that allows herds to travel during transhumance. And finally, the facilitation of installations and the farm transmissions. This pact is a result of a long consultation process lasting 3 years. I'm not going to read everything on the screen, but to put it simply, it took many meetings and working groups with the actors in the area who worked together on this project. And in particular, the herders who are the driving force behind the project. And thanks to this involvement of the breeders, the elected representatives of the municipalities also participated and welcomed this project. which has also presented to the inhabitants during public meetings. The adoption of this pact allowed in a second stage the implementation of an action program and made it possible to obtain financing to hire me to work on this program. A multi-stakeholder committee is responsible for running the Pastoral Pact. It contains breeders, elective representatives, and also all the agricole and environmental institutions. So some example of concrete action allowed by this Pastoral Pact. Informing elected representatives about the land use available to them. Integrating pastoralism into town planning regulations. Organize participative work camps to clean transhumance routes. Work on areas of former abandoned pasture land to reintroduce herds. Accompany transmission and installation, make pastoralism known for the whole world population, and share this approach to other territories. And the monitoring of the action program is carried out in a concerted way with all the actors of the territory, but also with academic partners. To conclude, this Pastoral Pact has enabled concrete progress in the field, and is a result of a bottom-up process made with local actors. It contributes to protect the biodiversity, landscape, and the cultural heritage of the area. So that's it. I hope you understand my English.
Yes, don't worry. You have heard my English. It's also not very good. That. Well, thank you. Also, you want to add something, Olivier?
No, that's
okay.
I can't get out of my place. Doesn't matter.
Yes, there are some questions for you, Olivier. You just look to this Q&A and on the bottom, and also for you, Noemi. Maybe you can try to answer this question by written, and you can write there if you want to.
Yeah, for Camille Castellin, yeah, it's possible.
Yeah, maybe you can send your email and answer. I think you can do it in a forward way, or if not, I can help you connecting you with. I have your emails, I guess.
I will send you in French.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you. It was a very interesting presentation with this both aspects, the theoretical part from Olivier. I think it's a really fabulous new idea called viability, and I love it. And I hope to hear a lot about this in the next meetings of Highlands.3, and I would love to have you in all our activities. And for me, it was really wonderful to hear something also from the practice side, and how we can bring these ideas to the real world. I would like to invite all the presenters to join us to start their cameras, and maybe we can put the gallery view to see all of you, and maybe I will bring a question for all of you, and maybe we'll go in the same order. We have only 20 minutes to discuss, and it's not that long. And if you want, you can bring also the questions in the Q&As area in order to also answer a little bit to this. But regarding to the time, I think you will have only one chance to say something, because after so many people, we will have no more time after this round, I guess. If we are fast, we can finish. But I will like to ask you, all of you, bring the connection of your presentation to the Highland project. Highland.3 want to compare initiatives in different range, in different mountain areas in the world, and want to learn from each other. And one of the key aspects of comparing, and after that looking for solutions, it's always the possibility to transfer solutions from one area to the other. In order to transfer something, we have to maybe to find out first the key aspects for success. And I would ask you to give us an idea, what are the key aspects that are not only explicitly only for your region, but you think it could be extended to other regions, to other contexts. Every context is different, but maybe you can identify some key aspects which are transferable, key aspect we need to look for. And of course, we will have to adapt these things to other regions. That's the starting idea. I think every one of you can think something and say something in this direction, and you can go a little forward, extend to the questions or your comment, maybe also finding relations to other presentations. If I will continue in the same order, that's why I will ask Manuel or Roberto if you want to answer to this starting question.
Okay, I think I can do it. Even if Roberto wants to add something, please do it. I would like to start by saying that, and related to this question, we have here presentations regarding theory and practice, and this is something sometimes we don't really connect theory and practice, and this is something that we have to do in this project. And also, you ask for transference and key aspects. I think it's very complicated just to give you one aspect, but I keep with the idea of Antonio, that he presented an overall vision of his experience about protected areas, and we are working on this. The question is why? Why we do that? And I think this is one of the main questions that we have to bear in mind. Why? Because sometimes we say we are doing something for some reason, but in reality, this is not really the case. And as researchers, we have to go to the field and with different methods, try to see what is going on there. And I'm thinking, at least in protected areas, and particularly in Highlands, the feeling that we have is why is not is the way that people say to us that is there is not really the why. This is why when we connect this or the question of are we doing this because we want to protect or because we want more tourism. This is one of our key aspects, and I would like just to have also always in mind the question of the tourism and the protection, because sometimes I think we are thinking more of tourism and not on protection. And this is for me one of the key aspects that we should bear in mind when we deal with Highlands. I stop here because we have 15 minutes. So.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe Franco, would you like to add something to continue? What do you think were the key aspects you find out in your example, and maybe which are the actors who need to be involved in these solutions or making decisions?
It's difficult to add anything to what said Juan Manuel, but if I touch the part that I was talking about my topic, of course, those methods are transferable in other parts of the world, but we are also did some modification and transfer other methods that are already have been developed. So it's hard to say anything about that.
Maybe you can go through the actors. The question related to you at the beginning was related with the actors. Who is doing what? And you had the farmers, and you have also the tourist actors. You have also the institution or researchers. How do they? Which are the roles there?
Yeah. It's hardly to say, but
yeah, I think, as I know, it's not they're not easy topics. Maybe if you want to move forward to Antonio and make maybe the connection about the comments of Juan Manuel with looking into the why and for what. What do you think it's transferable, and how?
I don't know, but if I may touch a question from Camille Castellan, I think it was the question for me, or comment. So
yeah,
if I may answer her,
yes,
I would say that I agree with her, but I don't know how it's in France or Spain or other parts of the world. But if we look on grassland, we are losing biodiversity if we don't have animal production behind that. So our idea was to give opportunities to farmers that are without cattle or other ruminants, or let's say all landowners that have opportunity to have the same management on grasslands like it was in the past. I mean, great first cut or enable plants to produce seeds. So our goal is that grassland will be cut, harvested, at least occasionally on a few years. But on the other hand, we are facing with problems on areas, and we also know that if people don't see their own economical benefits, people who live on that area, they won't pay much attention on biodiversity preservation, except if they have really big affinity to the nature.
Okay, thank you. Well, we'll continue to Antonio, and Antonio answered some of the questions in the Q&A section. I think all of you can read it. Thank you for that, Antonio, to take the time and put it in the written form. And maybe you can go to your experience and try to connect this water areas and maritime areas with the highlands, which are all in our interest. There are some similar things and aspects we can use and also learn from each other and exchange to adopt a better way of governance of the environment.
Thank you. So I said already that in my written answer that I consider highlands or mountains as islands. So there are many similarities because from the natural point of view, they are habitats quite small or at least reduced in some cases, although there are big chains of mountains. But from the natural point of view, biodiversity in particular, they lack connection and connectivity. So they are not like prairies or even the sea and the ocean, which has this continuity. So it's very difficult to work on restoration or conservation of particular species or habitats, because in some cases they are really reduced and isolated. So they are a cluster of islands, elevated islands, let's say. So from the technical point of view, what I think is precisely it's possible to share knowledge on the approach or methodological approach on how to ensure, and this is true not only for nature and for protected areas. For instance, when you consider energy on islands and small islands in particular, it's quite different from mainland because you have an independent and reduced grid. Although, for instance, you can share energy when it's being produced in Portugal by wind, you can use the grid to sell it to everywhere. Or when you don't have wind, you can bring it from everywhere. On mountains or islands, you cannot do that. So from the management point of view, it's very tricky to transpose solutions and success cases because they may not work. What I suggest is to identify, especially the cases where from the social perspective, it was well recognized, the success or the motivation, because this is beyond the value that you are considering to practice, and it has a even higher value, because it's the process and the way of the dialogue, the way you brought all actors to the table, the way you were able to bring research community to talk with common actors or common citizens, policymakers. So this is governance, in fact. This is something that you can learn and transfer from one side to another. But the best that you can do is to show yourself as unique cases. And cooperation, it should not be normalization, because this may hide the real analysis of the real effective problems or solutions that you may need to find. So Highlands, like islands, have everything to not cooperate. What you are doing is amazing because you are bringing together sites, people, communities, although the same subjects with different realities. And this is, in my point of view, networking, pure networking, it's the most important thing. So trying to keep cooperation as much as possible, but not normalizing the situation and even methodologies. Keep complex and diversity, because that is part of the tools that we need to be resilient as a community and as nature too.
Thank you for this idea. And Olivier and Noemi, yeah, I will make also the question to you. There also a question from Gabriela and asking about the coexistence and co-evolution in if it's possible in harmony, and if she bring the idea of competence between species in a Darwinian sense. And what do you think about it? Is possible this coexistence and co-evolution and co-viability? And I think that's not related to my question of transferability of the idea, but you can try to answer also to this question. Oliver, your microphone is now on. Yes.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you. The problem, I think that the problem is not the question. The question is I understand the question. It's very interesting, but you see the word of harmony, living in harmony with nature, is coming from the United Nations. And that means that they're thinking on a way that there is a humanity in a way, and in another way, nature or non-human living. And in fact, we are in the same living world. Is it possible to eco-evolve with a competence for survival among species is still happening in a Darwinian sense. Yes, it is possible, of course, but we have to use another way of thinking and of questioning. You see, well, that's it. The huge problem is that when we say we, it means European Occidental way of thinking. Because one of my figures shows that there are people in the world who have a different kind of thinking and of existing in a different way, and that means that there are big diversity of way of being. So and that's it. And so the question you ask have to refer to that human situation, that we are not all the same. I mean, there is we are in the pluriverse. I don't know if you understand pluriverse. But now we can't think, and we have to get out of that thinking on one way. The international convention, that convention was coming from an Occidental way of thinking, and if we want to save our world or our life, we have to think in another way, and to take why not, of course, local indigenous people as an example. Not all, of course, but more of them, a lot of them are style of lifestyle really interesting. Well,
yeah, I would like also to give Noemi the possibility to say something with the last word. I love the experience you share with us, but I wanted to ask you also in this thinking of learning from each other. That I suppose the process you have had was really long and not easy. That's not the easy way to do things. Discussing a lot with each other, bringing all the opinions. And you have a very interesting sentence there: status of pastoral practice, common interest. How that's a key aspect, to find a common interest. And what do you think that there is a limit? What is the possibility to find between several actors this common interest, and what are the conflicts? If there are conflict of interest, how do you deal with it? And it's only possible for a small community, only I don't know how many pastors with the same activity in the same region. What happens if you bring different actors in this group? What do you think about, looking from the experience, how to find this common interest? Your microphone it's
yeah.
not on. How was in your case? Was it easy to find this common interest?
Yeah, it's the pastoralism has effect on all the inhabitants, because it's the landscape is made by the herders. It's the landscape who allowed tourism. It's so it's very important for the economic reason in the territory. It's every inhabitant can see the effect on the pastoralism on the area, and so it's I don't know how how define. Yeah.
Well, we have learned from you that it's possible, and to find this common interest, and I hope to know your region and your example in my visit in France this year. I hope I can travel, and maybe we'll talk.
Many inhabitants understand this common interest of the pastoralism, but there are always inhabitants who are individual and don't understand. But generally, it's recognized that the pastoralism is on a common interest.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We have some difficulties with some local actors like hunters. It can be difficult sometimes, but it's not always.
Yeah, well, it's a very important point. I think we'll never find a case where there are not any conflict. We have always some conflict, and we have to solve them. And I hope we can continue learning from your experience. We will learn, and maybe this is one of the key aspects to take from one case to the other, how to deal with conflicts, how to resolve these conflicts, because we will always have conflicts of interest. Not all the people of the actors have the same interest. Look into the time, we are already out of time, and I will like to close this session, this webinar. I will thank you all presenters for your fabulous presentations and for bringing your experience to all of us. We have had more than 60 persons hearing to this webinar, and it will be available as a video in our webpage, Highlands.3 and I will invite you to look at it and to forward this homepage to your network. And to finish, I would like to show you the next sessions of our webinar. In our homepage, we'll find this the next dates, and the next one is related to sustainable tourism in mountain areas. We will have, similar as today, 4 or 5 presentations, and after that time to discuss. And this is the 27th of January, exactly in 2 weeks. And 2 weeks after that, we have always these 2 weeks rhythm. And in the 10th of February, we will have the webinar on food studies and mountain agriculture. And in the 24th of February, we'll have the last one about climate change. Following these links, you can go to the possibility to register again to this webinar. Well, I thank you very much also, Emmanuel and Hugo, for your help organizing this webinar from the beginning and in the next sessions. And I will give you the possibility to say goodbye, and well, I hope to see you in the next sessions of this webinar.
Bye.
Well, I put again the
Okay, bye-bye.
the gallery view because I love this one. It's a